Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, guys and dolls. This is Purple Zebra with a new kind of video. In these, I will be discussing the world of Stardust, a world that my story Stardust takes place in, and the intricacies that create the society that our characters live in. We'll call this... Oh, hang on. I think there would be something more appropriate for this than random character images. Hang on a second. There we go! Much better. I'm Ion, and this is the World of Elavida. For the first episode, we'll only be focusing on the planet Elavida, not any of the others that our resident aliens come from, which may be confusing considering my avatar Ion comes from one of those other planets. But for this video, we'll only focus on the civilizations on Elavida, specifically the different types. Conveniently enough, there are 4 different types that will be represented by our 4 main characters. The first is pretty simple to understand, kingdoms, which will be represented by Syosuke Marstana in purple for royalty. These kingdoms function like most other kingdoms in other fantasy settings. A tribe of people follows the rules of a singular monarch. Whether it's a king or a queen depends on the royal family. Yes, only those who are direct descendants of former monarchs have any claim to the throne. Currency and power resides only at the top, with most monarchs only looking to discuss relations such as trade and war dependency with other monarchs. Most people who live in kingdoms work in certain desired fields. If a kingdom wants to pride itself on mining, then most of the workers are miners, and they get their food and supplies from neighboring kingdoms. Vice versa for kingdoms who want to pride themselves on agriculture and get their luxury items from the former kingdom. Syosuke and his 2 siblings, Ileana and Chaos, are from the kingdom known as Mirker, a kingdom that prided itself on war. Not only did they mass-produce weaponry and defense tactics, but a lot of their citizens became soldiers and, even worse, they did experiments on children to try and breed stronger soldiers. Syosuke being one of those unfortunate cases. But that's a story for another time. Moving on, our second type of civilization would be the villages, which will be represented in red by Sky Kaze here. Villages are very different from kingdoms in that there is no actual leadership or someone to oversee everything that goes on. There aren't even police forces. Instead, all villages pride themselves on being self-sufficient. They raise their own meat, plant their own crops, invent their own materials, and much more. Currency, what little there is of it, goes in a constant circle, and most of the currency are simple trades of product for product amongst the villagers. There are usually very little luxury items such as precious jewels, but they don't seem to mind. However, there is a dark side to these villages. You see, since they're so self-sufficient, they often don't have connections to other villages or other civilizations in general. Because of this, if they were ever to have a bad harvest, they would essentially starve their population and slowly die off. So, they've taken to praying to different harvest gods to keep their crops healthy year-round. This is all fine and good, but then there are the bad seeds. Let's take Sky's village, for example. Sky comes from a village known as Fraj, who prayed to not only a harvest goddess, but also a goddess of destruction. They prayed to her in some hope and belief that she would rid the world of evil and save her faithful people. The goddess told them that they still needed to work hard for their village and couldn't rely on her to help guide them. So everyone took their work to heart and saw it as the only worthwhile thing in their lives, to the point that they openly shunned and ridiculed those with disabilities that made it hard or impossible for them to work. People who could barely stand or walk or hear or see or anything other than the norm were seen as omens. People like Sky. Next up is a little bit of a different place, known as the Pyramids, represented in brown here by Timber Vulcan. This one might be a little difficult to explain at first. Okay, so the pyramids aren't like the pyramids in Egypt that you know of. They are in fact floating cities. Not like Laputa Castle in the Sky, ancient floating city extraordinaire, but more like if you took New York or LA and just lifted it off the ground. Yeah, like that. They're called pyramids because they have this distinct pyramid shape to them. Do you remember what I said about kingdoms, where all the currency and power goes up? Well, this is similar. While there is no absolute power, the higher you are in the pyramid, the better and richer your lifestyle is. Or vice versa, if that makes more sense to you. Those at the very top are usually major corporations or companies that control most of the currency below. it also is the only type of civilization that changes the appearance of the individuals depending on their wealth. Those lower on the pyramid have lighter skin tones, while those higher are closer to the sun and therefore have darker skin tones. But there is something else you need to understand about these pyramids that will put it a little bit more into perspective, and will also lead us into our fourth and final type of civilization on Elavida: the slums. Now, you must understand the reason the pyramids are in the sky is a very selfish and frankly egotistical reason. Those who live up there believe themselves to be above everyone else due to their wealth and status. That's why the pyramids are the only city structures in Elavida that float. The slums are towns that reside right underneath the pyramids, literally living in their shadow. Why do they do this? Let me explain using our nice little avatars, with the slums being represented in blue by Aquamarine. You see, both Timber and Aqua live technically in the same city, Umarag, but while Timber lived in his floating city, Aqua lived on the ground in the slums. So whenever Timber didn't want or need something, he'd chuck it over the edge of the world. Out of sight, out of mind. Aqua, living on the ground, would wait for said thing to fall to him and use it for scraps, parts, or even repair it if it was simple enough. Essentially, those in the slums would take one man's trash and turn it into their treasure. None of these civilizations really get along. Most kingdoms think villages are full of cults who worship faraway beings and sacrifice children for their gains. Most villages think that kingdoms are dictatorships in which no one has freedom or choice to do what they desire, and that all monarchs are egotistical. Most pyramids think that slums are full of worthless rats who steal their leftovers and hoard them in their nest. While most slums think that pyramids are a waste of time, energy, and space, and that anyone who's up there must feel like they're on par with the gods, and hold a heavy desire for them to fall. And you want to know something? None of them are particularly wrong. A lot of kingdoms do force their people into one line of work. A lot of villages do rely on faith and shun those who don't. A lot of slums are filled with those who are spiteful and seek to take and not give. And a lot of pyramids are filled with egotistical brats who will one day fall. Only problem is, when they fall, they'll land right on top of us. And that's all for this video. Wow, I didn't even get to talk about any of the uncivilized tribes or actual angels strewn throughout Elavida, let alone the other kingdoms, villages, and slums that other characters come from. Heck, I barely talked about Mirkir, Fraj, or Umarag. But for now, that will have to be all. I hope you all like this new set of videos I'm planning, because oh boy, I could talk about a lot. This is Malice, wishing you a good night, and good luck. I'll see you all in episode 2.
You know I fall for love. Be kind to those around you, don't be merciless. Remember me, for my name is Perseus.